I'm Joni Miller. I am here with my good friend Christy Johnson, and we want to talk about the sense of how we can all be humanitarians, how we can all look at the world in a way to to leave flowers where we go so that those we interact with are better off for having known us.
And it's a wonderful aspiration. And we can do these in such small ways or big ways. There's a woman I see on Substack, and she makes these vases, these little, I don't know what they call those little jars that you can put little flower, you can put flowers in them. She puts out these vases of flowers for people to take away for free. And then the people return the jar, the mason jars. The people return the jars afterwards, and they just talk about how that really made a difference. She's not there like handing them out. They're just sitting there on a table, on a little ladder, or whatever, and people love it. It's so sweet that people do things just because it may make a difference to someone. That's sitting on their dining room table or that's sitting on their kitchen counter, making them feel better. How good, how great is that to know that just a few flowers can make someone feel so much better in life?
And sometimes we think that, obviously this week we lost Dolly Parton, who had an outsized impact on the world, not only through her talent, but also through her humanitarianism. Now, it's unlikely that any of us will leave a legacy of, what is it, 330 million books given to children. But not having that big goal doesn't mean that we can't start somewhere. She didn't start with 330 million. She started with one book, giving one book to a child. And we don't know where our seemingly small effort might ripple out, might snowball into something more, leaving more flowers.
More flowers, more books, more kind words. There are so many opportunities. I went to a grocery store yesterday, and the checkout clerk was so friendly and not in a creepy way. She was just really nice. She's talking, do you like this kind of kombucha? And it was just, people being friendly, people being open-hearted, someone who opens the door for you, someone who you drop something and they pick it up for you. Like there's these little ways in which we can be kind. And yes, donating 330 million books obviously is next level. But what's our little way of being able to contribute something? And we talk about this a lot here of finding our ways. And obviously, we're talking about evolving democracy. So we're talking about how to evolve as a nation, as a democracy, and so on. But doesn't that start with us as individuals caring about one another? It doesn't have to be completely politically oriented. It can be more about how do we help in general. And literacy obviously was really important to Dolly Parton. Her father was illiterate, and she felt like that always held him back. And what a wonderful thing to help other people become more adept, more able, more capable, more able to contribute in society themselves as they can become these new people based on these little things that they contribute. So it's us making our little mark, which may or may not be noticed, and we may or may not know the outcome, as we talk about a lot here. But it's that open-heartedness, that willingness to put something out there just because it feels like the right thing to do, and also because it feels really, really good, versus the super hyper entitled people. When we think about it in the comments, it's like, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, these people, even when they donate, it seems like they have an ulterior motive. Like somehow they're gonna get a benefit from the government, for example, if they do certain things. And so this is coming from a non-corrupt place, a place of this open-hearted, loving, caring, connecting kind of energy. That's what we want. We don't want this us against them. What can we grab? What can we extract? That's a word that just came to mind. We think about extracting the resources from our earth, extracting money from people. It's the richest country in the world, and it's being bled dry by these people. So again, focusing on where we can make a difference, where we can be helpful, not focusing so much on them, focusing more on what we can do on a daily basis, whether it's donating or volunteering or protesting or just being kinder and more loving.
Well, and remember, it's motivation. So some of those people who were named, I will not give them more airtime. Their motivation is more self-interest. And if we make our motivation to be human interest, that we are caring for our neighbors, we're caring for the least of these, that we want people to thrive. And our motivation, even in seemingly small efforts, is who we are. You know, we can't control the outcome. We can't control other people. We can't control how people receive, but we can control who we are and who we want to be in this moment. In this challenging time, who do you want to be? Now, for me, I want to be loving. I want to be able to care for other people. I also want to do what I view as my part to have an impact on other people to help them, frankly, see the world a little bit more like I see it, that there is uh, a loving place on the other side of this chaos where people can thrive. And we can do that in everyday interactions, and we can do that in this pro-democracy movement by finding a place that works for us, that works for our skills and talents and tolerances. Not that we want to just sit back and say, well, this doesn't feel good, I'm not going to do it. To push through a little bit so that we are stretching ourselves, we are growing as part of this. So we are not merely impacting others, we're impacting ourselves, growing so that we are more open hearted. The more that we can do these seemingly small actions to help others, because that's what we are going for. We're not trying to take over the government to enrich ourselves. We want fairness and equity and education and clean water and clean air, affordable housing, jobs that pay well. That's what we want. And that is not enriching ourselves, that is enriching society. And I think we can get there. I don't know how long it's going to take, but we'll get there in the end because it is a path of heart.
Beautifully said. And the evolutionary part of this, I think, is really significant because, if we go down the road of like we're all doomed, it's over, it's hopeless, then our evolution stops. We give up, we throw our hands in the air, and we do nothing. And the more people that do that, the less influence we're going to have. And if you pay attention, when people gather together and object to what's going on, then things change. They get nervous, they get worried. They start saying, maybe our dastardly plan isn't working as well as we thought. Because all these people are saying, no. I watched a podcast today, a live stream today, I think it was from yesterday, where it said 80% of people are against the data centers now. And so people that were like, yay, data centers, we love this, are now kind of, some of the politicians are kind of like pedaling back a little bit because they know people are going, I don't want it. I don't want it here. I don't want it taking electricity, power, power, water, whatever, pollution. No, we don't want it in our backyard. And so when we do step forward and say, this is what works for us and this is what doesn't work for us, this tiny percentage of politicians compared to the number of people they're actually representing, so many more voices can speak up and go, yeah, you know what? I want this over here. I don't want this over here. You're supposed to represent us. And if you don't represent us, guess what? We're going to find someone who does, because we're not looking for the unrepresentatives like we have here. We're looking for people that actually listen to us, listen to what it is we want as a collective, evolving, more compassionate kind of world, which actually, even those who don't know overtly that that's what they want, then it's probably going to come as a pleasant surprise when they discover, I actually like living in a kinder society. This actually feels more comfortable than being in battle constantly with people who actually aren't that much different than I am. You know, it's the 1% versus the 99%. The 99% really make a difference. We, as Joanne Freeman says, the we makes all the difference.
And if we concentrate on the outcome, there's a comment in there, comment in the comments about comment in the chat about someone who didn't think protests make a difference. And if we think totally about the outcome, is this going to impact? Then we're missing part of the point. It becomes, who am I in this moment? Not can this achieve what I want it to achieve? Who am I? And when I protest, I am being authentic to my beliefs. And that's who I want to be. I want to be authentic, and I get something from it by being around other like-minded people. So it's not merely, is this going to work? Because we don't know. We don't know if it's going to work. But who am I going to be? Who do I want to be now? And will I regret not taking action? Now, one of my counseling internships was at a retirement community, and talking to people near the end of their life, a lot of it was self-reflection. And the regrets were often about steps they didn't take, where they let fear get in their way, where they shut down relationships because of something that in hindsight looks silly. And after that, I started thinking, how can I live my life so I minimize my own regrets? And it's not that I'm not going to have them, but by concentrating on what I value and who I want to be now in this moment of chaos and crisis. Who do I want to be? I want to be someone who speaks up, and that is not natural for me. It's a scary thing, and yet it's important. That's who I want to be, and that's who I'm choosing to be.
And the question of whether protests make a difference or not, let's look at the Vietnam War. Did protests make a difference? Absolutely. Let's look at the civil rights era. Did protests make a difference? Absolutely. So you don't know which protest, like your drop in the ocean may
Mhm.
not be immediately recognizable as the thing that was the game changer, but collectively, looking around historically, I mean, in Hungary, there were big protests. The the idea with the protests being something that gives an immediate reward, like an immediate indicator that, oh, that changed everything, that's naivete. It's more the continued push, the continued emphasis, it's like repetition. Oh, we still don't like this. This is still a problem. We still object. We're still out here. We're not going to be quiet. We're going to keep complaining. We're going to keep saying things. We're going to keep showing up. That becomes like the force that cannot be stopped because people get very fired up, very animated, very intense about it, and repetitive. And that repetitive action, rather than like, well, I did a protest and it didn't change anything, but you continue to do that, guess what? I mean, they are effective. We know they're effective. And that's why people feel the urge to go do it because they know from history that people stepping up, speaking out, having the nerve to be seen, heard, and to say something, that changes everything. If they can keep you dormant and sheep-like and just, okay, I'm not going to say anything, you've already conceded, which is really not so great. And who would want the next generations to think they've already seen how politics has become more and more driven by corporate interests, both on the Republican side and the Democratic side. We've already invested in this that's not working. If we now just roll over, we're going to get the same or worse, probably worse, if we don't speak up, whether it's protesting, whether it's writing letters, whether it's, letters to the editor, letters to your congressperson, whatever. Like, this is the time, this is the opportunity to say what we want, how we want this world to look. And why wouldn't you go for it and go for the optimal, most optimistic route rather than, well, I'll just ask for half because half might be tolerable. No, you ask for everything and then you see what happens. Like, if you go and you ask your boss for a raise, you would ask for more than you hope to get. So if maybe they give you half of that and you're like,
Mhm.
yes, I got the amount I wanted. I mean, this is like swing for the fences, people. Let's go for the optimal and see what happens. Because that is what we really, really want. It is disingenuous, in my view, to say, yeah, okay, we'll settle for that. That'll be enough. No, we want to show up and go, this
Mm-mm.
is what I'm looking for because it's good for all of us.
Yeah, it's, swing for the fences. That reminds me of when I was in my 30s and I first started therapy. My therapist used to say, she'd very gently say, Joni, you're settling for crumbs again. Don't you deserve the whole piece of cake? and she was right. I was accepting just a little bit of concession from my then husband, and instead of saying this is what I want, this is what I deserve. And don't we deserve, and our neighbors deserve, the things that we're talking about: clean air, clean water, health care, adequate living, adequate housing. We deserve that. Our communities deserve that. Our planet deserves that. And the more we can get into that energy of, well, yes, of course, it should be a right of every person on this planet to have clean water and clean air and safety. And why don't we? Well, why don't we is probably because of greed, probably because of human nature, but we can channel the human nature to the good side, to the side where we are caring for each other, to the side of compassion. And in this chaotic and crisis ridden time, there are so many different ways to contribute. Like Christy said earlier, Dolly Parton cared about literacy. And so that's where she spent a big focus. We care about so many different things. We have so many different skills. There is no one way to make a difference, to make an impact here. And sometimes we uh, get stymied because we think we see someone who is, well, I'm calling all my congresspeople, I am doing phone banking, I'm doing all these things that frankly scares me, because that is not me. I don't have to be that person. I shouldn't be that person because that person isn't me. So we think that we need to do all of this, and if I can't do all of this, then why bother? Well, take one step. One step forward is one step closer. And that may not be the goal that is yours. Your goal may be somewhere over here. And taking a step lets you get momentum so that you can go in the direction that makes most sense for you. There are many, many ways to contribute right now. And part of it may just be being kind to the grocery clerk. You never know the impact that could have.
And one of the comments is so poignant. You know, someone said that their daughter said, why aren't you standing up against something that at the time she didn't know anything about? And then she educated herself, and now she can't say she doesn't know anything about it. And that's now moving her toward, what can I do? She doesn't want her daughter to say that to her again. And even if you don't have children, it's still like, I don't want to say to myself, why didn't you do more? Like, was there something I could have done? Was there some way I could have contributed? Was there some way I could have stood up that would have made more of an impact? So rather than going there, you talked about the regrets already, dialing it back to, what can I do today? How can I contribute today?
Mhm.
What action can I take? What can I do to move this whole experiment, if you will, of democracy forward so that as loving human beings as well as constituents, we can build a better tomorrow. Because we have to remember that underneath all of this, we are humans. Even though they want to dehumanize, they want to other people and so on, we can't fall for that. We have to keep coming back to what's the most open-hearted, loving, compassionate thing I can do here for myself as well as for others. You know, being kind to ourselves, like this day I didn't take any action, but tomorrow I will. Tomorrow there's something I can do. I can contribute something. I can smile at someone. I can educate myself on something. There's so many ways that we can make a difference. It's easy to forget that we can do a little something a lot rather than a lot of something infrequently. Like say I'm going to do this big thing. I'm going to have this big rally. It's going to be every 6 months. Okay. But what about all those days between
Mhm.
those 6 months? Can you do a little something? Can a lot of people do a little something that adds up, you know, putting coins in the piggy bank? If we're all putting the figurative or literal coins in the bank, if we're all putting a little something in there, we're going to get a lot farther than the big shebang, the big boom, the amazing thing. Those are great. If that's your lane, go do that. But the rest of us can be like drip, 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 drip. We've talked about this before. You know, water wears away rock. Rock seems harder than water, but water just keeps at it until it makes its path. We can be the water. We can be that relentless
Mhm.
force that just doesn't shut up. Which I was never that before, as we've said. So, you know, we can grow and evolve. We can do something differently to make ourselves aware, awake, engaged, connected, hopeful. I mean, that I think is such a big piece of this. It's not like, oh, it's over. We're doomed. We're done.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be. I
Yeah.
mean, if we were, we wouldn't be having these conversations. They would not allow them.
And anytime that we are moving from taking action from that open-hearted space, whether it is something seemingly not political, we are moving forward because the fight now seems to be fear versus love. And the more we act in love, through love, with love, the more we are affecting the whole. And so every action that we take that is grounded in compassion and our own integrity moves the needle, becomes that water wearing down rock, because we are fighting not just this political climate, we are fighting fear. And people are afraid and they're acting from fear. And when you are cornered, when you're afraid, you lash out. So the more you can put love on that, it becomes a bomb. So the more love we can spread, the more impact we can have.
Even loving resistance. I mean, we don't have to be hateful about what it is we want.
Mhm.
We can just, it's sort of like no can be very kind. No can be like the thing that says, this is what's true. And I'm going to say no against what's false. So the corruption is a no. It's a strong no. And we can say, because we love ourselves, because we love our country, because we love the people that are not benefiting, because the corruption's happening. From that place, we can say no to what is not okay and say yes and welcome what we really hope to see. We don't have to be hateful. You know, we can keep coming back to, yeah, that's not going to work, but this does over here. These are like really strong boundaries that help us stay focused on the movement instead of focused on the aggression, the locking into something, the terror, the coercion. Like there's a lot of ways we can transcend this stuff by coming back to what's true for us, where love sits and where love can go into action. We always talk about putting love into action. This is us being empowered to stand for the truth. Like you think of Martin Luther King, you think of John Lewis, they were relentless.
Mm.
And they came from a place of spirit, of it was somewhat religious, but it's this place of like, humanity needs this. And together, holding hands, we're going to move forward. And we say no to what hurts us, harms us collectively. And those, bird just hit my window. Sorry
Oh
about that.
no.
A hawk was chasing a bird. Okay,
Oh no.
back at it. The bird flew off. The hawk is on the pillar fountain. It was shocking. Anyway, we can continue to come back to how we want to be in the world rather than getting in this like hard scrabble, we're going to be as ugly as you are thing. No, we're just going to keep saying firmly, no, this is not okay. This is how this works. We're the ones that are going to tell you how it works because what you're doing is not working. And just being that courageous, that courage has come up a few times in the chat here with one of our wonderful listeners, to have the courage to stand in our convictions, which is these are the things we
Yeah.
value. And let's keep repeating, this is what we value. This is what we value. This is what we value. Even if we've been asleep for 50 years politically or whatever. We're awake now, a lot of us, and more people are waking up, which is what's so beautiful. This is what matters to us.
And the quote about courage in the chat is something I have on my wall at home. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow. And that is part of what we want to emphasize too, is some days we might feel like we didn't do enough. Some days we might feel like there was no impact whatsoever, but we don't know that. All we can do is wake up tomorrow and say, who do I want to be today? What actions do I want to take today? How do I live with my values? And in the chat, there was some beautiful discussion of values because we are ruled by our values, whether we know it or not. It's an internal compass that keeps us going north. And if we feel out of sorts, it's often because we're veering away from what we truly value. And we have to be gentle with ourselves, give ourselves grace, because we're not always going to get it right. But we can try again tomorrow.
And tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. The future is open-ended. There's so many opportunities for us. For anyone who hasn't started doing something in the comments, our landscaper apparently has not been voting. And after a conversation with my husband yesterday, he said he may vote in November. Oh, this is progress. Because if they hadn't had these conversations, the courage to say, this is what I believe in, this is why I believe it, let's see where we can go from here. This is courage in action, continuing to show up and not being 100% on all the time, but being this, again, that's sort of the water analogy comes to me of like, you keep going and you just keep trying and you keep attempting. I'm sure that Dolly Parton wasn't like, let me track how those books are impacting literacy. She just probably was like, this feels right. And they're so grateful that they get them. And I highly value books. She loved to read. I was listening to an interview from her in 2001 on NPR yesterday. She'd read anything she could get her hands on, the Farmer's Almanac, like the Sears catalog. Like she was just hungry for learning, and she couldn't bring books home because the younger kids would rip them up and stuff. So she couldn't bring books home from school. So she would read anything she could get her hands on. So she just had this faith and trust that she was engaged in something meaningful to her, meaningful to those who receive those books. And now I hear there's an outpouring for that imagination library of people donating everything they have, like everything they earn the rest of the week, or doing something on an ongoing basis. It becomes this contagious thing when you realize, yeah, this was a cool way to make a difference. And it lives. It has its own life now. It wasn't just a Dolly Parton thing. It's part of her legacy, which is amazing.
And that's where we started. We want to be like Dolly. We want to live our values. And it started with one book. We can start with one conversation, one flower, one drop of water against the rock. And when we do that enough times, it grows. And with that, let's put love into action together.
Together. Thanks for coming, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.